thank you all for attending this important hearing. I never knew my grandmother. She was an immigrant to the United States in 1911. She brought 3 children with her. One was a 2-year-old, my mother. They took a ship. They started in Lithuania, where my mother was born, took a ship to Baltimore, not to New York and Ellis Island, and disembarked and somehow found their way to Illinois. I don't know how. I'm sure no one spoke English. She brought precious few things with her because she had 3 kids to worry about. But one of the things she made a point of bringing to the United States in 1911 was a Roman Catholic prayer book written in Lithuanian. I didn't know the significance of that prayer book. I'd seen it around the house, and my mom took care of it. But it turns out that the Russian Tsar had made it clear that this was contraband. This was illegal. You couldn't have a Catholic prayer book printed in Lithuanian. It had to be Russian. Somehow or another, my grandmother, with limited education, felt that that little book was so damned important that she was ready to risk it by bringing it to the United States of America. It was her statement and our family's statement about her freedom, the freedom of her family to practice their religion. They wanted to be here in the United States of America to practice that religion because they knew that this was a different country than the one they were leaving. Many of the nation's founders fled religious persecution, so religious freedom was critical to them as it was to my grandmother. I still have that prayer book, incidentally, up in my office. That's why the freedom of religion, often called the Constitution's first freedom, is enshrined as the First Amendment to our Constitution. But throughout our history, the United States has grappled with anti-Semitism, which historians have called the, quote, oldest hatred. One infamous example is the 1915 Atlanta lynching of Leo Frank, a prominent Jewish American businessman. Frank's kidnapping and lynching spurred the revival of the Ku Klux Klan, who were notorious for their anti-Jewish bigotry and violence. Most recently, we've seen a resurgence, a sad, tragic resurgence of anti-Semitism in America since the horrific Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023. And now I'd like to say a few words about the hearing that we had on hate speech as it impacted all religions: Jewish religion, Muslim religion, Christian religion. Yes, we had a hearing on hate speech. We didn't focus on one aspect of it. We focused on many aspects of it. One of the witnesses, or at least attending, I shouldn't say witness, but attending, was the mother of a 6-year-old boy, a Palestinian boy from the suburbs of Chicago. His name was Wadi Al-Fayumi. The landlord in the house where the Palestinian family was living came to the door and told them to leave. And when they didn't leave, he pulled out a knife and stabbed the 6-year-old boy to death repeatedly, over and over and over again. His mother was hiding in the bathroom. She'd been stabbed as well. It was clearly a hate crime, and it was based on their religion. And the fact that that was part of the hearing did not diminish in any way my strong feelings about anti-Semitism. It is the same hatred that we are trying to stamp out in this country. In 2023 alone, which only includes the first 3 months after October 7th, the FBI reported 2,000 hate crimes against the Jewish community. More than 2/3 of all reported religious-based hate crimes in 2023 were driven by anti-Jewish bias. I'm making no excuses for that, but whether your bias is against the Jewish people, Muslim people, Christian people, or any other religion, it is still a hate crime, and in America we should condemn them all. As chair of this committee, I held multiple hearings on the growing threat of hate-motivated violence. We heard compelling testimony from Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker. I hope I pronounced that name correctly, did I? About the 2022 hostage crisis at his Colleyville, Texas synagogue. He told us how he opened the door to the terrorists because of his belief, the rabbi said, that the temple should be, quote, a house of prayer for all people. He also testified he survived that day because As the leader of a synagogue in America, he was well trained to respond to security threats. We have to work together to bring about a day where rabbis need only be spiritual leaders, not security experts as well. Rabbi Citron Walker told us that, quote, a terrorist chose a Jewish synagogue because he thought the Jews control the world, end of quote. We must do everything in our power to debunk this bigoted lie, which has driven so much anti-Semitism throughout history. Let's be clear. There is no justification, none, for anti-Semitism, whether from the left or the right side of the political spectrum. Violence or threats of violence have no place, none, on our college campuses and should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. It is up to the political leaders to stand up and condemn anti-Semitism wherever and whenever we see it, even if it's coming from the most powerful people in the nation. That's why I feel compelled to say how troubled I am by some of the actions of this administration. First of all, I reject President Trump's comments that, quote, any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. That was a statement by President Trump. And, quote, people in this country that are Jewish no longer love Israel. That's what the president said. What does that mean? On his first day in office, President Trump issued a full, unconditional pardon to the thugs responsible for the January 6th insurrection. Many of the rioters who received pardons openly embrace violent anti-Semitism. Take Robert Keith Walker, who wore a black hoodie emblazoned with the quote, the shameful quote, Camp Auschwitz on that horrific day. Or consider Timothy Hale Cusinelli, who prosecutors identified as, quote, a white supremacist and Nazi sympathizer. A white supremacist and Nazi sympathizer. He told his co-workers that, quote, Hitler should have finished the job. Those are the words of Timothy Hale Cusinelli. He frankly often dresses up to look like Adolf Hitler, and here's a photograph. At Hale Cusinelli's hearing, Judge Trevor McFadden, a Trump appointee as judge, said, quote, statements and actions like yours, he said to Cusinelli, make Jewish people less safe and less confident they can participate as equal members of our society. After his release from prison, Mr. Hale Cusinelli was welcomed as a speaker at two events held by President supporters at his Bedminster Club. At one of these events, he received an award from Ed Martin. Name sound familiar? Now serving as President Trump's interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Mr. Martin called Hale Cusinelli, and I quote, an extraordinary man, an extraordinary leader. This president has also given an outside role in his administration to Elon Musk. Mr. Musk has endorsed and followed some of the most far-right German political parties. He even suggested that, quote, there's, quote, from Elon Musk, frankly, too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that, he said. In response, Dani Dayan, the chair of Yad Vashem, the world's Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel, said, and I quote, contrary to Musk's advice, the remembrance and acknowledge of the dark past of the country and its people should be central in shaping the German society. Failing to do so is an insult to the victims of Nazism and a clear danger to the democratic future of Germany. The Trump administration has also launched a broad attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, which has already led one federal agency to suspend Holocaust Remembrance Day observance. If the Trump administration is truly committed to combating anti-Semitism on college campuses, they would not be talking about eliminating the Education Department's Office of Civil Rights, which is responsible for enforcing anti-discrimination laws in schools. In fact, the administration has already laid off a dozen officials from the Office for Civil Rights and ordered remaining staff to halt most of their work. I am deeply concerned that President Trump and his allies have promoted the so-called Great Replacement Theory. This theory was cited by the gunman who killed 11 worshipers at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the most deadly assault on the Jewish American community in our nation's history. He claimed that Jewish Americans are conspiring to destroy the white race by encouraging non-white immigrants to invade our country. In closing, I'd like to quote from a statement I received for this hearing from over 100 national and local Jewish organizations, including Reform, Conservative, and Reconstructionist movements, warning that, quote, history has made clear that our safety as Jews is inextricably linked with inclusive, pluralistic democracy and with the rights and safety of all people. When the rule of law and democratic norms are threatened, anti-Semitism invariably increases, and Jews and all communities are made less safe. That was a message from 100 national and local Jewish organizations about this hearing. I hope this committee can come together, across the aisle, to protect our democracy and protect the safety and security of the Jewish community.